but you also have this easier setup process. You have a bunch of extra modules, content types that you can use out of the box. And then there's smart defaults and best practices that are built in that encourage you to do things the best way. So you can assume that most sites need all of this extra goodness that's baked into Drupal CMS. And the end result might be exactly the same, that finished product in terms of the code base, in terms of the configuration. You get the same thing, but it's the process that's really different. So with that said, I really want you to be able to see what this looks like. So I'm going to show you a bit of the setup, and then I'll take you to a site that I created locally that we can walk through a bit, creating content. And then we'll dig more into the recipes and how you can use pieces of Drupal CMS and use Drupal CMS as a tool for your Drupal projects. So just hopping over here to Drupal.org. So this is this page you can get to. That's the trial experience page at /Drupal CMS/trial. You can fill out this little form. This is an easy way to get set up. So if there are people here in the room who have not yet tried Drupal CMS, it's easy. It really is just a few clicks to get to this stage. And this just allows you to go through the install or the setup process. So this is one of the first things you'll see that's different, is that the setup process is more guiding you through. It's actually prompting you to see, what kind of content do you want to set up by default, and then prompts you to create your account, and then runs through the whole Drupal install process. So this takes, once you've put in your account info, it's going to take a few minutes to run. So I've already set this all up so we can skip the couple minutes that it takes to get everything installed. And where it takes you right away is a dashboard. And so if you've ever used the gin theme in Drupal, this will look quite familiar, because that's used in Drupal CMS. And we also have a lot of customizations that are made really with the content editor audience in mind. So the fact that we have this dashboard here that gives you some links to top tasks and prioritizes your content. We have this create menu that jumps you right to content creation, managing your content and your media, and seeing things that are deleted. So these are just things that content editors look for and expect in any CMS. Then if I'm jumping over to actually creating content, which is, I think, where we see a lot of the UX improvements. If I come over here, I'm going to see a few things that maybe are a bit subtle, but if you've built a Drupal site, I think you'll appreciate that they're there already without you having to do anything. So I'm going to create a website, and I've been obsessed with audiobooks recently. I have a toddler and I don't have time to read anymore. So I'm going to just create a blog post about why audiobooks are so great. So I have some content here to put in. One thing that Drupal CMS comes with that I really appreciate is media management already configured. So you can just start adding content from your media library right away. If you start to add that same media content in to your WYSIWYG editor, it's going to give you some nice settings around the size of image that you want to use. So these are all preset for you. And these are all responsive images. So we don't have to be like thinking and planning ahead for the way that images are going to be optimized and displayed. The defaults are taken care of for us. If I go in and paste in my content, so like most people, I like to draft my content in another editor, like I use Google Docs. I like all the commenting features it has. But then when I go about publishing this content, I still want to make sure that it's accessible. And I see here when I pasted it in that something got added that doesn't quite work in terms of accessibility. So the accessibility tools recipe that comes with Drupal CMS is already flagging this for me. It's showing me that there's an issue and telling me how to fix it. So that's already configured and going to be pretty simple for me to come along and fix. Other things that we have in terms of content best practices, if I scroll down to the bottom, I have this SEO tools feature, and I can tell it that I'm trying to get this page to talk about audiobook benefits. It's showing me a little preview of what this content actually looks like in search results, which is super helpful, using the metadata, and then gives me some potential suggestions. And then also within my content, if I want to be linking off to other pages, I have this link it tool that's here, letting me, maybe I want to link to my About Us page. And so this is all built in. So there's nothing here radical that we see that, you know, doesn't already exist in the CMS space. It's more just the ease with which I can just start using all these features. You know, I can schedule my content. That's something content creators always love. I have my automatic alias already created for this content. I don't have to think about the paths. I can go in and customize, but it's not necessary. And yeah, I can just start using all of these best practices without thinking too much. And then if I do decide to go and click off somewhere else, there is also an autosave of drafts. So if I make a mistake and click away, I can kind of come back to where I was without losing all my work. So I'm going to save this. Of course, I didn't fill this in. Go. I'm going to save my blog post. And so you can see right away that there's just a lot that we get out of the box with Drupal CMS that you and your content teams can start using. One more thing I wanted to show you before passing it off to Rich to talk more about recipes is about using Drupal CMS as a learning tool. So I've been a Drupal trainer for many years. So I've been, you know, working on onboarding people who are maybe working at a big institution. They've been using Drupal there for a long time. Someone new joins and they get sent to a training. I've got to learn Drupal. And it can be a real challenge to onboard new people onto your system, especially, you know, throwing them in the deep end with a site that's already very complex. I find Drupal CMS is such a great tool for learning because it's set up in a way that's standardized. There's documentation that's starting to be built that's standardized for it. But it's also useful to learn on because it has AI, and AI tends to be this good kind of coach. I find you can also use the AI features of Drupal CMS to help you build your site. But even without going that far of trusting it to build your content types, you can just get it to coach you on how to build content types. So I just wanted to show you that feature and suggest that this is a really great learning tool for people. So let's say I'm relatively new to this world and I want to set up my audiobooks website. I want to go ahead and start creating book reviews, and I can use the AI as kind of a tool to help me figure out how to do that. So let's say I tell the AI, I want to add book review content to this website. And it's going to tell me at first, you know, here's what you can do. You can create this new content type. You can add fields. It's giving me some ideas of the fields that it would suggest for a book review. And then it it can actually do all that for me, which is great. But what if I just want it to be a coach? So I can say, I can ask it just like, can you give me instructions? And because if I'm new to Drupal and I've never set up my own content type before, um, the nice thing is that it's going to walk me through this process. So it's actually telling me where to go, how to add the fields, what kind of field type I might want to use. And this is very helpful for new learners because it's giving me the step-by-step and it's been now personalized to the thing I'm trying to build. So I want to suggest to you if um, you're already using Drupal, but you have new users to show them Drupal CMS and get them to kick the tires on it, use it in this way, build confidence, and have a playground where you can go and create a site. And this is a good way to start familiarizing yourself and getting used to it. So with that, I'm going to pass it off to Rich, who's going to dig more into our recommendations and how you can use recipes.
Thank you, Suzanne. All right. So I'm going to start by talking a little bit about the recipe system. And so, Drupal CMS really makes a lot of use of this. So for example, at the very beginning, when Suzanne showed you the installer and she was selecting the different things that she wanted to build, that uses recipes behind the scenes to do that. And so when we talk about recipes, they're essentially a set of configuration instructions that can be automatically applied with little to no user input and no additional coding. So that's really, really powerful. And so when you install Drupal CMS, you get a lot of things out of the box. Again, Suzanne had mentioned the different best practices that it puts you in line with, and also just helpful tools that you don't have to, necessarily go in and configure yourself. Although you can go in, after the fact, and we're going to see that a little bit later, and make the changes that you need to. So you can see here that there are some basic sorts of things that get installed for privacy and SEO that get extended. And so there are other, recipes that you can add to it to even extend it further. And then there's also some of these basic things that provide, out of the box experiences that you would expect from a CMS. So when we think about the optional recipes, so for example, Suzanne had demonstrated earlier accessibility tools. So that one extends the one that I showed you earlier and makes it to where you have, that check that's happening as you're building the content so that you are, able to, do a really great job with your content, from an accessibility perspective as well as with SEO. And so you can pick any of these that you would want to add after the fact, after you've already installed Drupal. Suzanne also showed us AI Assistant, so you can go in there and you can add that one as well. In terms of some other things that SEO tools provides, I think that's a good one to talk a little bit about. Is if you wanted to basically, like with your meta tags, if you want to do any kind of configuration with your sitemap or robots.text management, those are some other things that brings to the table. So, if we hone in on a specific recipe, the Google Analytics recipe, that's one that our team at Evolving Web has been involved with. What it does is it will automatically, with a little bit of input from you with your tag, it will configure Google Analytics tracking. And then also, as you can see here in the screenshot, showing kind of a mobile view of Drupal CMS by default, it also provides the consent manager and cookie manager through Claro. So you can see that demonstrated down here. And it provides sensible defaults. So I was going to show that to you here, how easy it is to do that. And so when we go into, here's the dashboard for Drupal CMS. If we go to extend, and then we go to recommended, you can see here that we have this Google Analytics recipe right here. And you can go ahead and just click on the install. And it will just ask you for a Google Tag ID. And so this is the user input that I mentioned. So, not having to code, you're not having to do a lot of configuration. You're just basically going in and, providing it with that identifier. And then you hit continue. and then it goes really quickly. And so out of the box, you can just see already that when I had mentioned Claro, for the consent and cookie management, you can see that right here, and it gives you, this is all configurable, but out of the box and based on the default configuration, you already have a number of different items here that are all configured for you. And if you want to configure things further, you can go to Web Services and then Google Tag. And you can see this is the Google tag that I had input at the very beginning. And you can see that, in terms of sensible defaults, it's not going to do anything custom for you. You can add that in yourself and get deeper into things. But one of the really nice things that it does do for you is it provides all of these different paths. So as you know, with Google Analytics, if you're tracking, you want your tracking to be accurate. And so if you're tracking things for your editorial team or you yourself doing things in the back end, that's not great. It's kind of cluttering, all of your public facing analytics. And so out of the box, it provides all of these different paths that get excluded, so that you will not be tracking things, when you're on an admin page, for example. In addition to that, you can also do some configuration for the Claro, and there's a number of different configuration options that are there. There's a lot that you can do with that. So when I mentioned earlier, it's an entire system for Drupal recipes. And so there is the ability not to just add the recipes that are available by default, like when we were looking at the screen where I picked Google Analytics. There's also a number of different recipes that a whole ecosystem is being built up. So one of the places you can go if you wanted documentation about exactly how you would apply recipes, and some of the different commands that you would use and how to go about it, you can see the documentation here. And I do want to mention that as this ecosystem is developing, that there are more and more, what is being worked on is that the project build browser will be able to support all of these different, third-party non-core recipes over time. So that's really good. But in the meantime, what you can do if you're already an existing Drupal user and you wanted to add some additional recipes, you can go out to this recipes cookbook page. And what that provides is, so there's different starter recipes that you can use when you're starting out a site. If you're using Drupal CMS, that might not be as, where you would want to start. You'd probably want to take a look at these functionality specific recipes and be like, oh, okay, so I would really like to have alerts on my site. I'm going to take a look at that, and you can check out to see if that meets your needs. But it, very similar to all the recipes that we've been talking about up to this point, it creates those different sensible defaults and does a lot of the work for you, so you don't have to do it yourself. And then there's a few different recipes and tools down here at the bottom and packages that are very developer centric that can be helpful for the recipe system in general. So one of the things that I also wanted to show is that, so I have a Drupal CMS site built that has events already configured. And so when you do that, you automatically get, if we go back to here, you automatically get, it'll create an event for DrupalCon Atlanta, which is great. It just gives you an example of an event that you can change. But if I wanted to set it up to where maybe I wanted to have for Chicago, have Drupal meetups set up for the next year. They meet, every other month. How would I set it up so that I would have recurring dates on the event so you can see all of the different instances that are available? What you can do is, this gets technical, but what you're able to do is, this is a way to basically include the recipe, so you can do that through Composer. And then this is the command that you would run to basically apply that recipe to your site. And then I also, I really like ddev. It's a very standard way of doing things with Drupal. And so, I also included the ddev there, the ddev command. And then, I also wanted to note that you would update a couple of different things on the back end, to get that enabled on your content type. So you would, make a change to the field storage and set up the recurring events on that date field. And so what I did is I ran through like, literally these different commands that we have here. And then what I was able to do is I was able to create this. And just to show you what it looks like on the back end, it gives you this nice interface where you can do really complicated things with dates. And I was able to create what I needed to in order to, match up with that schedule, which, I just wanted to use for the demo purposes here. And then you get nice things like even being able to override, like, let's say that one of these events is actually going to be a little bit later at night. You can go in and tweak that. So this recipe was able to leverage everything and make it to where, and you can see it automatically, pushed it like you would see in like Google Calendar by an hour. And it made it to where I was able to do all of that work through the once that recipe was applied. Another thing I wanted to talk a little bit about, so we've been talking about recipes quite a bit, but as an existing Drupal user or with an existing Drupal site, what sorts of recommendations are there that we can provide to start looking at incorporating some different things from Drupal CMS and this ecosystem, with recipes, moving forward? So one question might be, if you want to configure Drupal CMS features on your site, do you have to reinstall? Do you have to completely reconfigure Drupal? And this is a question we've gotten before. And that's not the case. So because Drupal CMS is built on top of Drupal core, you're able to enhance your existing Drupal 11 site. And you could do some of the things with Drupal 10, but if you want to have a close experience, because Drupal CMS is built on Drupal 11, that will give you the closest experience to what you have been seeing today. So there's different levels of complexity and like level of effort. So an easy example would be if you want to see the admin, if you really like, if you like this admin and you'd like to add it to your Drupal 11 site right now, it's really easy to do. You can it's a core module. And so you can just basically, enable that and you will get a similar look and feel and, management of your admin interface. So that one's really straightforward. More medium complexity level would be, if you wanted to install a third party, like a contrib module for a project browser. What you would need to do is, on your site, you would go ahead and go through the process, with Composer in most cases of installing project browser. And then that would give you the interface that I was showing you before, where you're able to basically go through and see all of the different recipes that are available, and gives you instructions about how to get those installed. And then even further, more complex than that would be the evaluation of applying the actual recipes themselves. And so that goes back to where I was showing you the different commands right now, as that's being worked on with Project Browser to make that even simpler to do in the future. All right, so if you're thinking about when and how you would go about beginning this process, I would recommend that if you already have a Drupal 11 site, you're already set up for that, and you can basically get started right away. Or if you're preparing for a Drupal 11 upgrade, that's a really good opportunity. A lot of the time, we see that our clients will want to kind of rethink things a little bit. There may be, like for example, like maybe you want to update your content workflow, your editorial workflow, to take into account some of these new SEO and accessibility tools, and get that all set up at that point as part of that Drupal 11 upgrade process. So that's a really good time to start thinking about what you would want to incorporate. And in terms of the how, so how would you go about doing this? You would want to identify, any of the new functionality or configuration that you would like to add. The page that Suzanne showed mentioned earlier, where it shows all the different features of Drupal CMS that can be helpful. You can spin up Drupal CMS very easily to check things out on your own. And we're going to get into some additional details, going a little deeper in terms of how you can figure out what Drupal CMS is doing and how you can apply that to your site. And then you can also evaluate the recipe definitions against your own site's configuration. So maybe you already have Google Analytics installed on your site, and you are wondering, hey, am I excluding all of those backend pages when I was showing you all those paths? And you go and you check, and you're like, oh, I'm not. So that's one thing that you could take and apply to your site and make your analytics tracking a little bit better, because then it's excluding all of that non public traffic. So that's a quick example of something you'd be able to do. But if you really want to start to dig in and dive in a little bit deeper into this, what you would be able to do is, if you were to go and you're more technical, you can download Drupal CMS, and you can take a look at the composer .json file, and you can take a look at the installation profile that Drupal CMS uses, and you can actually look at the recipes themselves and see exactly what they're doing in the code. So this is just meant to give you a little bit of a pointer, like the path that you would take if you're wanting to dig in more. And basically, if you're thinking of yourself like as a we had a client, for example, who was asking us, like, going back to that rebuild that I mentioned, are we going to have to rebuild our site? So what we would be doing is basically working through taking a look at these different areas and comparing it against the configuration that's already there. They're happy with their content architecture. They're happy with the way that their site looks and works, but they are realizing, as they see Drupal CMS, that there are some really great things that they would like to incorporate. And so this is a good way to just start to dig in and do some of those comparisons and be able to see exactly what's going on. And it does require some technical perspectives, but it's similar to completely like having to rebuild a site. Like that would also require technical know-how and a technical approach. But this is much lighter weight, and again, this is something that you could incorporate into a Drupal 11 upgrade and just identify. And you can even do things very iteratively. You don't have to do everything all at once. You can just identify things that will be helpful to you and get those installed sooner. And then we've also gotten questions in the past about, like, how Drupal CMS could be helpful if you have a multi-site platform. So imagine that you're an organization or you're an agency and you're wanting to basically spin up, whether they're microsites, or you just want to have a standardized installation process for basically, every time that you build a new site, you just want to have a lot of these the best practices and everything included. So obviously you can use Drupal CMS, and you can use that as a starting point, and there's nothing that wrong with that, but there might be more that you would want to do. So there is this new recipe installer kit that's available that you can use to basically, what it will do is, Suzanne demonstrated earlier the installation process, through the Drupal CMS installer. And, there's this screenshot of part of it right here. So what this module does, what this project does, is it helps you to basically generate a installation profile that will leverage the Drupal CMS installer. And so what you can do is you could decide, well, I don't need all these options, or I want completely different options because I'm a university, I'm government, and every time we build a site, it isn't even really an option. We always have events. So you could make that just a default, similar to those other default recipes that I'd mentioned earlier. And so you can determine exactly what you would want to include, and you can basically have a list of all the recipes that will be applied. And there is this in terms of there's this, you can look at the configuration for Drupal CMS, and basically you can see here that everything that is required versus optional is listed. And so you can just determine all those things and basically make it to whatever it needs to be. And so there are definitely some benefits to doing that. As I mentioned, like let's say that you have microsites, you can standardize that installation process. And you can also, as an organization, you can take the concept of what Drupal CMS is providing, since it leverages that same system, and apply it to your own platform for your organization. Like we will have clients that have, 50 different sites and they want, they're all, needing to be managed. And, as they add more sites, they want everything to be standardized. So it really helps with that and makes it to where things can be consistent and follow best practices. So there's a lot of benefits to it. And then in terms of things that you could watch out for, you don't want to be too opinionated. I think that that's something even before, like, install profiles have been around with Drupal for a really long time now. And so one of the things that you have to be careful of is that if you're too opinionated about things, then you're having to kind of like undo work as part of the process of spinning up a microsite. So you just want to be a little bit careful about that and think about like what are the things that are truly necessary versus some of the different things that you'd want to be optional. And I think that's what's great about this is it gives you, where you can kind of like force some things and then make others optional. So that helps you in that regard. And then you don't want to make too many assumptions either. And that kind of goes along with the being opinionated because you want to make sure that there's some flexibility to it so that you're not having to do work to undo things. You want to keep it, somewhat lightweight. And another thing that we're thinking about too is that when we work with these, when we've traditionally worked with these large multi-site platforms, we've done things with configuration, installation profiles, features in the feature module. And so one of the things that we've thought about is how this incorporates in, and I think it's we're still going to need to find the right balance between what do you do here versus in some of those other areas with like configuration, recipes, features, all those other things. So at this point, I'd like to turn it back over to Suzanne to talk a little bit about the future.
Great, thanks. Thanks, Rich, for painting that picture. So we talked about Drupal CMS, how you can use it on your Drupal site, and you saw what Drupal CMS does today. But this is a product that has been developed, in about 8 or 9 months. So not a huge amount of time so far, and we have version 1 released today. But there is a roadmap, there's a product strategy that Dries released for Drupal CMS that's quite ambitious, kind of a 3-year plan, and basically has things in there for content teams, for marketers, also for designers. And so I just want to put it on your radar that there's a lot planned also for the future. So Drupal CMS today is giving you all of Drupal core, all that flexibility, but also all these features. So we didn't even get to all of them. It comes with web form, it comes with accessibility features, data privacy, all of this. On top of that, already planned for 2025, I think one of the biggest things we're excited about is the first version of Experience Builder being added. If you are, into CMS, one of the things that we are often looking at are different page builder tools. In Drupal, we have paragraphs, we have layout builder, but Experience Builder is a tool that's being developed that's React based that allows you to build out your content in a dynamic way. And it's exciting because it's so fast. So if you've seen a demo of Experience Builder, you'll get excited about it because every click is just so much less expensive in terms of your time. It's just much, much quicker to put things together. So that's something we're excited about it. There's also a lot more recipes coming for marketers. Like you saw in that interface that Rich showed you, you can enable these optional recipes now. There's a lot more that's planned for things like multilingual and other common features. Better documentation. We have a link at the end of the presentation to the documentation that you can start to check out, but that's being built on. And then more around AI you can expect to see this year. There's also ongoing work to improve the UX. And so the improvements that have already been made there hasn't been full usability testing done. There's still a lot of things we know we can improve around installing recipes and around the setup process. So this is being worked on. Easier ways to try out Drupal CMS. So that trial page is a first step, but we really want to lower the barrier to entry to just setting up a site, kicking the tires, getting marketers in front of it. And then also in the future, designing adding to Experience Builder so that it's meant for a design audience and really getting designers more into the Drupal space. So a couple of things I'll just draw attention to that I'm really excited about for the future roadmap. So first, our marketing integrations. I think this is something when we're talking about Drupal to the marketing community, they often hear about modules, you hear about plugins, but what people really want to know are just like, what are the integrations? What can I plug into Drupal and what works well? So I don't have a lot of setup to do. And of course, there's so many marketing tools out there, but the idea is to say, here's what works well with Drupal. Let's prioritize the integrations that are really more seamless and easy to use. And the other thing, of course, Experience Builder. If you haven't seen a demo of it, we don't have time today, but there's video so you can watch, and there's actually an upcoming Acquia webinar about Experience Builder that should be very exciting. It really provides this faster experience. It looks kind of like Figma because it has this layered approach to the content and all the settings around content. It's a no-code page building tool, and the design tools are planned to be added so that a designer could also use this to update the styling of content. So we have lots of information we threw at you. Hopefully there's some good questions this has generated. As you're thinking of the questions, I'll just throw these links up here on the screen. And maybe I'll paste some of these into the chat to make it easier. So there's the trial experience. There's the documentation for Drupal CMS. And if you have questions that are left over from this webinar, you can feel free to get in touch. My email is suzanne@evolvingweb.com. And if you love webinars, because you're here, maybe you love webinars, Evolving Web is hosting another webinar tomorrow about AI translation workflows for Drupal. And so if you have a multilingual Drupal website, I encourage you to check that out as well. And we'll put all these links into the chat for you in a second. So if there are questions, I would love to hear people's reactions.
I know. Will we be sending the deck to the webinar attendees? No, but we can, if Suzanne shares them with us, we can upload them to the Drupal for Gov website where you can get a copy.
Yeah, for sure.
Any other questions? Do you have any further suggestions for messaging, selling the implementation of Drupal CMS in a business case that will be assessed by non-technical business leaders outside of faster time to market? Have you found accessibility and making things easier for content editors to be a hard sell, unfortunately?
Yeah, I'll put this first link in here while we're talking about it, because this is the landing page for Drupal CMS on Drupal.org. So the messaging around Drupal CMS, I think that to start with, like the first round of marketing Drupal CMS, the easiest thing is to use it to expand Drupal usage amongst people who are already, to some degree, familiar with Drupal. So for example, if I know we work with a lot of institutions that are using Drupal, but they actually use many CMSs. And they think of Drupal as being like, oh, this is the big hitter. Like we have a big project, we're going to use Drupal. But that rogue marketing team that wants to spin up their own site over the weekend might say, oh, I'm going to build that on, I'm going to build it on WordPress, or I'm going to use Wix, or I'm going to use something that seems lighter weight. And I think just repositioning people's expectations around the setup time for a project and who can dig in and build a website, I think that's kind of the first thing we can change in terms of impressions. So that's what I would start with. So, one thing you can do is just say, like, let's try to get more people at an organization excited about Drupal and using Drupal. That's a bit of a softer sell to start. I think once we have the type of demos that Experience Builder will allow us to build, the marketing to the wider audience of marketers in general is going to be much, much simpler.
I see another question after. Michael Craven asked, do the new features change the role of the developer in Drupal?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think maybe Rich, I'll let you answer this. I used to be a developer, but I can't say that I'm play that role anymore.
Yeah, so I think that this does empower, as we get more no code and low code approaches, it does empower users to be able to do more themselves. But what I like to think is that as, more features become kind of more like table stakes in terms of the way that CMSs work, that we'll be able to focus development effort on things that are more unique and, have a larger impact on like a particular organization. And so rather than doing things that we've done over and over and over again, like how many times have you configured a WYSIWYG, or how many times have you configured, Google Analytics? Instead, you can focus on like what has more impact as a developer, like, some really great integrations from, like, let's say, in terms of like the different tags that are applied to pages and how you're tracking, the flow of a purchase flow, for example. So I think that in terms of how it would change things for a developer, I think it would make it to where you're able to focus on, things that have a bigger impact.
I love the next question. Is the Drupal CMS and the recipes a stable release, and is it ready for production for government sites?
Yes. So it's a stable release. And remember that this is Drupal core and a whole set of vetted modules carefully selected and configuration carefully added. That's gone through a more rigorous process. So I would say we can have like a high degree of confidence in Drupal CMS. And that's sort of why it exists, is because it is the best practice. I also realized I'll go back to the first question, which was such a great question, and I wanted to add something. So like a lot of what I showed today, Drupal CMS, a lot of what's being focused on is content editor experience. But when you compare Drupal and Drupal CMS to other easy to use tools that people might mention, like, well, we all know CMSs. Drupal is just such a high quality in terms of the flexibility, in terms of accessibility. And so it already puts us at this really high level. So adding content editor experience on top of that is kind of like the icing on the cake that makes it easier to get started. But it's already head and shoulders around a lot of CMSs. So I think we shouldn't miss that when we're trying to position Drupal CMS, is that it does have all that flexibility, the security, the accessibility that we have come to rely on with Drupal.
I'm really excited about the recipes in the recipe installer kit.
Yeah. And hopefully at that Drupal GovCon in August, there'll be all kinds of people who have done this, and we'll have more real life examples.
Isaiah has the question, can you give some examples of how Drupal CMS interacts with the US WDS theme?
Yeah, it's a great question about theme integration because, of course, Drupal CMS is Drupal, so you can use it with a theme, but most themes have some assumptions baked in around configuration, around content types and fields, and like the actual display of your content. And so, of course, there is some adaptation, like with any kind of setup where you'd have configuration and theme that need to align. But generally, I think we probably are short on examples because it's still early days, but this is something you can expect to see in the near future.
Are roles and permissions in Drupal CMS managed any differently than core Drupal?
No, I don't, I'm not aware of any changes to that. I mean, I know that there's been some work on some access control, but I don't think there's anything in Drupal CMS directly. So, I mean, just to expand on that a little bit, so I think that that's one of the things that is very powerful in Drupal core. So it provides a lot of that out of the box, and so you have all of that still available since Drupal CMS is built on Drupal core. So you can make sure that like the roles will have the permissions that they need, and that you have users assigned to those roles, and it works well.
And I assume the same answer of yes applies to the next question of can we create custom themes modules for Drupal CMS?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep. So I think that one of the things that is great too is that by having all of these different, like I had shown before in terms of with the installer, you can use what Drupal CMS has out of the box as kind of like an example. So you can take a look at the core recipes. Like I don't know, like my early days with Drupal, I used to love to go into Drupal core and figure out how to do different things so that I would follow the patterns. And as I was learning, okay, here's how the core maintainers are doing things. So I think it's very similar with like these different recipes and things that you can leverage. But yes, like you can create custom themes in the modules. To Suzanne's point, you might want to give a little bit of thought of, like if you're going to integrate, like, a calendar, take a look at what is already built for you and figure out like if that makes sense or if that's something that you would need to change a little bit. Like in terms of the events, I guess, just to be a little bit more specific.
I really look forward to the integrations. I know I use a lot of the tools like Hotjar and Screaming Frog, and like having that additional integration that works seamlessly with Drupal will be a wonderful thing to see. Thank you so much for providing such good information about Drupal CMS and providing an idea about the roadmap moving forward with Drupal. Last call. Any more questions before we drop off? I want to make sure everybody gets an opportunity to ask any questions they have. Does it integrate well with the migration module out of core?
So it's similar to what I was saying before. So anything that you're able to do with migration, since it's built on top of Drupal core, it will integrate in. I don't think you'd have any negative impact or any extra work. So yes, it will work well with the migrate module.
Yeah, and look for that on the roadmap of things in future, like easier migrations because it's more standardized and automating migrations, things like this. So thanks so much for assembling such a great crowd of people, and thanks everyone for joining and asking questions. So we hope to see you all soon at the next GovCon or DrupalCon.
Yes.
And thanks everyone.
Yeah, thank you again. Thank you,
Thank you.
everybody, and see you next month.